This is Be United in Birmingham at CLG's regional listening event tackling race inequalities. My name's Samina Kiani and I'm joined by Sadiq Khan MP. Sadiq, thanks for taking time out to speak with me.
Pleasure.
We're in Birmingham today at Communities and Local Government's regional tour tackling race inequalities. Why is this so important to the government and what do you hope to achieve?
Well, it's really important that we, government, go out around the country. This is one of many listening exercises and meet ordinary people, people who work in this area, to find out from them what they would like to see in a future race strategy. And it's really important that I'm here to listen for myself of the views that people have.
You know, Be United has been travelling the country. We've been following the tour, and some people I've spoken to were a little bit sceptical, saying, another strategy, you know, don't the government have the answers by now, and are they wasting money with another race inequality strategy? Well,
it's really important that those sorts of people who maybe have cynicism or may have feelings of apathy are listened to, and we need to meet the questions that they're asking and meet their demands. The reason why it's important that we go out and listen to people and speak to people is because as the problems of society change, the solutions must change as well. And being perfectly frank and honest, politicians haven't got all the answers themselves, and ordinary citizens often have better ideas of how we can solve problems than politicians. And I'm humble enough to go out and try and listen to people and say, listen, these are the problems, what do you think the solutions are?
And I was in Bradford with Be United. We hit the streets, we were talking to people. I talked to obviously it's a strong Asian community there. I was talking to a lot of women there, and you know, the one thing that was coming across to me that was said by many of the women was, you know, we've got limitations within our own community, limiting us to integrate with a wider community. You know, how do we deal with limitations like that, boundaries like that?
The basic job mission that I have and that my department has is to devolve power down. We want to turn what used to be subjects, the Queen's subjects, into citizens and then into active citizens, and we want to empower communities. We know that only a quarter of British women of Pakistani and Bengali origin work. That's not good enough. We know there are examples of British citizens, women of Asian origin, who don't feel empowered. We want to help them be empowered. For example, we've got a Muslim Women's Advisory Group that tries to empower women, gives them the skills they need. But we need to make sure we give as many tools as we can to ordinary citizens to make them feel in charge of their own lives, and so they can change their communities. It's far more effective for citizens to change their communities than from politicians top down.
Have you got any other ideas to help, you know, women, not just from Asian backgrounds, black, other ethnic minorities, where, you know, it's not the obvious thing for them to do, go out and mix, you know, just, you know, more encouragement? What other strategies can you come up with?
There are lots of things. Very recently we've just launched a single equality bill. Part of that is making sure that we meet the challenges that women face in the 21st century. Although they represent 51% of the population, unfortunately, when you look at all the top jobs, when you look at public life, women aren't represented as they should be, so there are tools in there that will make it easier for them to do so. We're also trying to encourage employers to take on women. For example, I'm also the Minister for Fire and Rescue. There aren't enough women in the fire service, whether in senior positions or in junior positions. We need to change that. It's really important that our schools give girls the skills they need to be adults with the skills to get jobs. So we need to make sure there is no area of our curriculum, sciences in particular and maths, which previously were no-go areas to girls, are no longer no-go areas. There is no reason at all why a woman born, raised, educated in the UK in this century cannot go on and do whatever job she wants to do.
Okay, just going to the jobs, just talking about that, staying there for a minute, you know, talking to people in Brixton, London and Bradford and, you know, around the tours, you know, they felt that there was a gap in the employment where ethnic minorities were concerned. You know, how can you ensure there's training, adequate training and education, you know, so we're all on an equal playing field?
The reason why the people you spoke to think there's a gap is because there is a gap. We've narrowed the gap, but if you look at, for example, the numbers of people from ethnic minority backgrounds who are employed versus those from the mainstream community who are employed, there is a difference. And we've narrowed that gap after the 12 years. We need to do more to narrow that gap. That's about not only giving people the skills to get the jobs that they deserve and utilise their talents, but making sure employers or public authorities that discriminate, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, aren't allowed to do so. And it's really important that at an economic downturn, when we're probably going into the deepest and possibly longest recession in people's memory, that we don't have women and ethnic minorities who suffer the most. And so we know from previous recessions that disproportionately speaking, women have suffered and have ethnic minorities. We need to make sure we learn the lessons from previous recessions and don't allow the same mistakes to be made this time.
We were, as I mentioned, in Brixton, which is a heavy black population, and a lot of the people I spoke to, it was mostly men, they felt they couldn't go on camera to speak up, and they were a little bit suspicious of the system, of the police. You know, how are you going to bridge that gap, that, you know, that relationship? Because it's a tough one.
One of the things that we've just done is we've reviewed the last race strategy we had. In 2005, for the first time ever, we had a cross-government race equality strategy, and we've looked back at the last 3 years, the lessons that we can learn and the progress made, and huge progress has been made. More, for example, black, Asian, minority ethnic people in the police service than ever before. More scrutiny being done of what they do. And although there's been progress made, there are problems as well. For example, there are still too many young black men, young Asian men, British, being stopped and searched, compared in contrast to, for example, young white men. There are still too many people of African Caribbean descent in the criminal justice system. We need to make sure that we look at and recognise where the problems are and find solutions as well. Some of the solutions are going to be things that I've thought of, or my ministerial colleagues have thought of. Some of the solutions will come from the people you're speaking to, and that's why we're really keen to take on board some of the views that people who speak to Be United say, and we can take on board their concerns and make sure we address them as well.
Why do you think that's happening then? Why do you think black and Asian people get stopped more?
Well, firstly, I think it's really important that black and Asian people have the confidence to tell us their experience. It's really important for them to feel they've got the confidence not just to speak to you, but to speak to me as well. But thirdly, we need to try and see why there is a problem. Is it, for example, that there is a subjective way the law is applied, maybe applied unfairly? Could it be, for example, that previous lessons haven't been learned? We know what the issues are. Is it an issue of training? And I can tell you that the government ministers are committed to make sure we have a 21st century public service ethos. That means that the experience you have as a citizen should be equal, fair and just, and we're trying to make sure that the new race equality strategy takes on board the lessons of the experiences that you've seen from the people you've spoken to make sure that our new strategy deals with some of the problems you've recognised.
You know, the tour's coming to an end now. We've got like Bristol and London left. What's next?
Well, the tour has been very important, but this wasn't just about the tours. The tours were 8 major parts of the country. We also have the website. We also have other social marketing techniques to try and get people's views, whether it's people on their soapbox talking to you, whether it's others as well. We're going to look at all the responses that have been made, all of them, and we're going to see what sort of lessons we can learn from that. And we'll come back, I hope, with a race equality strategy that people like and they have a sense of ownership of. We'll also be unveiling some more funding, and we'll take on board some of the points people raise when it comes to deciding how that funding is allocated. And what we're also going to see very soon is the Single Equality Bill turned into a Single Equality Act, which will make our country in the 21st century even more equal and even more fair than it ever has been.
Okay, Sadiq Khan, thanks for taking time out.
Pleasure.
Have your say by registering online at www.be-united.org.